like, so they were looking at Bethany's and interested in that. And then this starts happening. They jump on, long story short, FBI ends up getting involved in Casey McDaniels, you know, and they made the first arrest in 24 years with that case and charged him with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of rape. I mean, it was, you know, it was in a nobody case. I mean, she still has not been found. So, I mean, you know, that I don't know what they have or whatever, but the podcast is what started all the talk. Just like with Up and Vanished in Georgia, you know, it brought attention to those 2 cases that, you know, were multiple years old. And, but at that point I was so burnt out, I couldn't do it anymore.
All right, welcome to The Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Path Distilled.
And we're so excited today. We have Brandon Barnett. He's a musician and a podcaster. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
And so your podcast, you've done several. I'll leave that up to you to tell us about it. But could you tell us a little bit about your work and what you do?
Yeah, I'm a musician, a songwriter. So I write and record music, and then that kind of parlayed into doing podcasts because I was a huge fan of those, you know, and I could produce everything in the podcast myself because of the music, you know, make my own music for it.
All right, so could you take us back to how you got started in music, and then that'll lead us into how you got into podcasting?
Yeah. Dad played guitar, you know, there was always a guitar around the house. And my mom was a Perkins before she married Dad. And I live in Jackson, Tennessee, which is the home of Carl Perkins, who is the, I don't know, the father of rockabilly, I guess is one of the titles they give him, you know. So I had, you know, aunts who were, you know, they were married into the Perkins family. My grandfather was Donald Perkins. He was Carl's cousin or something. Anyway, so it was always kind of around, you know, just in the air. And then, of course, you had the whole son thing anyway in Memphis. You had Elvis. So I was born, let's see, I was 3 when Elvis died. And like all my family were, you know, huge Elvis fans. Everybody from around here was, you know. So you kind of had the Carl thing with the family situation. And then you had Elvis, who was just the biggest thing, right? And so it was just always around, you know. And so I got hooked on Elvis records, you know, and then the Beatles. I discovered my mom's Beatles. My mom's the one who had all the collection. My dad always says they were so poor growing up, he just had to listen to the radio. Mom had a bunch of 45s, and she had the Meet the Beatles, the first LP over here, you know. It's called something else in the UK, but so yeah, around 8, I discovered the Beatles and started, anyway, just the Elvis thing. I was doing Elvis impersonations at like 4. An uncle took me over to meet Carl, and I got an autograph, you know. So that's kind of a unique deal, man, to be that young and have, you know, again, we weren't that close. We weren't close to the Perkinses, but close enough to where I got to meet him, you know. So dad was a assistant song director at church and played guitar, you know, just self-taught, and would sing. And I asked him to show me a C chord, I think, at 12. And then I was like, well, show me the next one, you know, and he just kind of showed me the chords in that key. And I played, you know, guitar just around the house.
Were you taking lessons at that time?
No, I ended up taking, what happened was at 16, I don't know how personal, you know, we want to get, Kevin, because, you know, we know each other. But if you remember, I had those Chevy 2 Novas, man. I drove so I got into antique cars. So when I turned 16, you know, I was worried about girls and driving and fixing those cars up. And I put the guitar down, you know. Okay. And then Nirvana happened. And because I was sick, I couldn't stand I got to where I was so sick of the hair bands in the 80s. And I just couldn't relate to it. Spandex and Aquanet, dude, I couldn't relate to that. So I went back and just dove into the 60s stuff, my father's music, my parents' music. And I just thought that was the best era for music. And then Nirvana happened and all that kind of followed that. I wasn't the biggest Nirvana fan, but it relit it, man. And I picked the guitar back up. I don't know, it was around 18 or 19. And then I never laid it down, I'm 46 now. So
what did that early involvement look like? When you first picked it back up, were you taking lessons, just learning on your own?
I started buying like the tab books, they had the chords in it. And the Lemonheads were my band because I thought they were they call it power pop. It's basically like 60. It's basically like the Beatles, it's just kind of low key, really catchy, guitar driven rock. It wasn't too heavy. I wasn't into the heavy stuff as much. I liked it. Like I was a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan, but their sound to me was so different than a lot of that other aggressive. I was just, I don't know, man. I was a peaceful dude. I was just kind of acoustic was more my thing.
Yeah.
So it started out just like learning some Lemonhead songs, and then I had it in my head that I wanted to that I should take lessons. So I started taking lessons from Robin Arrett, a guy in Jackson, and he's great. But I would never do my lesson. Like I thought, I don't know, man. I was so young, even though I was younger for my age. Even I was really green, man. And I just thought you had to know everything about everything in order to participate, right? So I thought, okay, I need to learn how to read music. I need to learn how to, learning these chords is not enough. But it turns out I would never do my homework. And then at the last minute, I would just find a Gin Blossom song or something that I wanted Robin to teach me, and I would end up just learning songs, and because I really sucked at doing the homework. Now I learned to read enough, and I started taking classical guitar, and I learned how to finger pick. And Robin took me as far as he felt he could take me, and then he was going to move me on to an actual classical teacher. I wasn't that into it. So I just kind of quit lessons after that. But I developed my right hand for finger picking, and that became my style. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So they would give you things to do before the next meeting or the next session, and you, instead of doing that, you would just pick up something and learn it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that was the thing. It's like I didn't want to cancel on the lesson because I knew, that's how he made his bones, man. That's how he made his living. So I wasn't going to bail on him. And it was, he wasn't giving me stuff out of the blue. It was like, Robin, I want to learn how to play classical guitar. So he would do his best to go, okay, start here. And it would be like, this really mundane, just ding, 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 ding. You're playing like the Farajaka or whatever. And I asked for it, but I didn't want to do it, And so, but what you could do, he was so good. And he had this, back then, everything was still kind of on cassettes, So he could play, or even if he had a CD player, he could play it. And he could put it in a tape deck and he could slow it down. But he would figure out the song. So he wouldn't even know what I was going to bring him. So I didn't do my homework. And he'd be like, well, where were we? And I'm like, yeah, Robin, I didn't really do my stuff, man. Would you teach me Hey Jealousy by the Gin Blossoms? And he's like, sure. And then he'd start. And that was the lesson. And I paid him. And I guess we were both happy,
So what comes next?
I meet a guy. I taught a couple of my buddies to play, Ryan Stone, and I didn't realize how integral he was to my story until a podcast I'm doing now, which I needed him for. But that dude didn't play music at all, and this Nirvana thing, all this alternative music, that was happening, we started hanging out. He was still in high school. I had just graduated, and I taught him to play guitar, and that dude picked it up. And so we started playing together, We both were insecure and felt like we couldn't be in a band. We weren't that good, but we would play together. And he was really good just naturally he'd put a capo on up the neck and play in the same key, but play different things. So we weren't playing just the same strumming patterns and all that. And the goal was to write. We just, in the beginning, we just couldn't do it. Writing was the hardest thing for us, for me, I don't want to speak for him. I know it is for him. He's told me, but so that's kind of how that happened. We just kind of just banged around and because I wasn't really too good at learning cover songs either. I was kind of lazy when it came to that. And I would know, I would learn enough to, and it was kind of fun. Okay, this is fun, but it was just like, well, this is somebody else's stuff, man. It's great, but what? Okay, so I'm the best at playing "Hey Jealousy" by the Gin Blossoms. Like, what? There's got to be more to it than that. I ended up going to community college during this time, and I dropped out like 3 times, man. I didn't know. And I never went back. I'm a college dropout. So that's just, but first I thought I wanted to do I wanted to be a history major or a poli-sci. And I didn't want to do that. And then I was like, well, I need to be a music major. And that's when I was going and doing the classical stuff and all that. And then I realized that, like Evan Dando, the Lemonheads, like dropped out of high school, and here he was touring the world. And I'm like, it's all about the song, man. Like, it's all about the song, that's all there is to it. And, the stuff wasn't super technical, but, you did have to have some kind of know-how to do it. And then I wanted to be and this is going to tie in, believe it or not, I'm not going off the rails, but I wanted to be I thought I wanted to do journalism, Of course, I'm still at community college. I'm still having to take all my basics. So I was taking junk, man, that I didn't care about. And I should say, I think this is a huge reason for the way I am. Some people put a lot of stock in like their signs, like their astrological signs or whatever. I put so much in the fact that I'm left-handed. Okay. I'm left-handed. I play guitar right-handed. Okay. So I'm right-brained. All right. Creative, blah, but it's a mess. Like I'm the messiest dude. Like I could always find my locker in school because mom was the one that had the papers sticking out at the bottom. I'm just not detail oriented at all. Right. But I daydream a lot. Mom used to tell me as a kid, get your head out of the clouds. If I had $1 for every time she said, get your head out of the clouds, man, that'd be my career, daydreaming, So anyway, I did get off the rails. Oh yeah. But I thought I wanted to do journalism. And so I took a professor at Jackson State, and he taught creative writing. Okay. And I'm going to go back too, because it wasn't until later that I realized that all this stuff fit together. Mom read to me a lot as a child. Okay. And with me being right-brained, like math, I suck. There's no reading comprehension. That was my jam. Taught myself to read before I started elementary school. It was Bible verses, but I knew, church was a big deal back then. When you're a kid, that's all you did is you went to school and you rode your bike and then you went to church. That seems like that's all I did. So I taught myself to read before I ever got to school. And usually good readers are good writers, just because you soak it in, And I sucked at the technical side of it, like diagramming sentences. It's math to me, man. But Dr. Perry, I loved the way he did the class because it was, you wrote 8 stories throughout the semester, and he would just keep giving them back to you, red inked. And he'd tell you what was wrong, turn them back in, and you kept doing them. And so, half the week you'd be revising an old story, then he'd give you a new one, and you just kept doing that. But it was only like 8 stories, and then he would grade you. Your final was I don't know if it was just one or a handful, but you turned in what you felt were your top stories. That's how you got graded. Dude, that class right there blew my mind because he would give us stuff like, okay, I want you to do a story. I want you to write a story about registering for your classes at Jackson State. The most mundane, boring. Well, man, I turned it into this huge thing where I was like, because I was last minute Lucy anyway, because I'm right brained. That's going to keep coming up. I'm just sloppy. I'm late. I'm not punctual. I just do And so I had this whole deal where I was like, I really wanted this one class, and I just found out at the last minute, and I was, pushing people down the hall, trying to run through, jumping over tables, and made it into this huge, like, Tom Cruise movie kind of thing, And he was like, he read inked the hell out of it, because I think I wrote in like all capitals and everything too. It was like everything was bad about it except the story. The story was, he was like, man, this is really interesting. And then I dropped out. I just dropped out, and I went to work. And I met a girl. That's what it was. I met a girl and I got married. Yeah, that happens. And then so I just started working, But that was all that ended up being later,
So go ahead, Lauren.
I was going to say, so when you were taking this class and decided to drop out, got married, were you still playing guitar at that time?
I did, just around the house. I never did much, and I still hadn't written a song at this point. But the girl I married, she had a 6-month-old, and so that marriage only lasted 4 years. So I mean, I raised this kid for about 5 years, and I would play guitar around the house for him, but I put it down then because I mean, I was doing the adult thing,
So how did you transition from this period of time to the next step of your music and podcasting journey?
I got divorced, and no, seriously, I got divorced. Okay, and then, well, I guess I should say this is a formative thing too. This is something I don't talk about a lot. At 22, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, which pretty much killed any chance of me having kids. And that was another reason at 25, when I got married, that I was so willing to take on a child, because I figured, that's probably the only shot I'd have at doing it. So when that marriage ended, I had a house that I'd bought for us. She went back to her hometown, obviously took the kid with her. It's getting way more personal than I wanted, but it is integral to the story. And so I'm sitting there in an empty house. I've got a 3-bedroom house, and it's just me. And I picked the guitar back up. And at this point, Ryan Stone's starting to come over. Of course, I've got this cool house, to myself. And I'd also started an online record store. This is back when eBay was just coming on board. That's why Elon Musk is my favorite person ever, because he had me at PayPal, man. Because I went global from day one. So we were a single income family when I was married. So, it was my wife and her child, and I was the only one bringing in any income, and I was working from home with an eBay store. And what I had this dream of is eventually I wanted to do a publication, kind of like Paste Magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with Paste. They kind of started out as like a record store, kind of an online record store. This is web, the first version of the internet bubble, right? Before apps and stuff. So, eBay was just coming online, PayPal, I guess Napster and LimeWire and all that. As far as music, everything was, people were trying to figure out how they were music industry was kind of against the wall at that point. Anyway, so I had this plan of like, what I wanted to do is take this record store, morph it into a brick and mortar, and then rent some place downtown in Jackson, and then live above it and start my publication. And all that was I thought, this is how naive I was, to free me up to make music, because I really wanted to be an artist.
This doesn't sound very freeing. That sounds like a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. It was futile. It was a fool's errand, man. But so I was in music regardless, whether it was on the retail side or making it. And but you got to make a living too, so that was the more practical thing. And then I ended up not doing the business anymore. And but like I said, my friend Ryan Stone was coming over, and we started writing, and the divorce actually spawned 2 songs that first ones I thought that were proper songs. I'd probably written some crappy things before, but this was the first time And then he and I started playing out. They started some open mics in town, and first time we'd ever done that, we started playing out together, and that thing just kind of grew. Ended up meeting Jonathan Singleton, who is now a hit Nashville songwriter. He kind of took us under his wing, and we would open for him around town. And it was just, and then, I don't know, that open mic kind of just brought in all these other songwriters from town, because Jackson's kind of a cover band town. You know, you can go and find someone playing Mustang Sally any night of the week, well, at least before COVID, you know, and songwriters were kind of, you didn't know they existed. And so that was a good learning experience. And that kind of fueled the whole, and we actually wrote some pretty good stuff, and Jonathan recorded us at home, you know.
And so where was Jonathan in his career at this point? Was it
Jonathan was still the house band at Barley's. He was in the band The Grove, but right at the tail end of that is when the label people were coming down, and you know, we were all hanging out back when all that hit.
Okay.
You know.
And for you listeners, that's he now runs 50 Egg, which has Luke Combs, another artist that you might have heard of.
Yeah. Jonathan's done all right, you know, for himself. But I'm trying to think of what really. I ended up getting married again to a girl who played guitar and wrote songs, and you know, we played out a lot. And of course, you know, at this point, man, we're in our 30s, you know, so Ryan and I kind of drifted apart. You know, he was having kids, I was getting married multiple times, you know, whatever. You know, you're doing your thing, you know how it is, you just go your separate ways. You know, and you're just kind of concerned with making a living, you know. But at the same time, I had a little 8-track, and I was still trying to get with my second wife, you know, because she could write too. I don't know. We started trying to look into the Nashville thing, even though we weren't country music people, didn't really care for it. I mean, cared for some of it, don't get me wrong, but by and large, it wasn't our bread and butter, you know. And then at this point, Jonathan moved up to Nashville. So, it's, you know, he kind of opened some doors for me, and I went up there, you know, and messed around enough in Nashville to realize that I probably could have done it if my heart wasn't in that style of music, and that style of writing. And that sounds like a cop out, and you know, I'm willing to say, you know, Nashville kicked my tail. That's fine. I have no shame in that. But I didn't care after a while either. You know, I wasn't just like, oh man. Getting a song on the radio was a thing, you know. But my biggest musical influence was Elliott Smith, who I ended up finding out about because of the movie Good Will Hunting. And he was kind of his soundtrack was used in that movie, and of course he got nominated for an Oscar for it. That was kind of the Simon and Garfunkel in The Graduate. It's the same kind of deal, similar sounding music too, acoustic bass, but that movie is kind of paired with his music, just like The Graduate is paired with Simon and Garfunkel. And I was like, man, that's the way to go right there. If you can get your stuff in movies, I'd rather see it. I'd rather be sitting there watching my favorite show and hearing myself come on than the radio, because I'd quit listening to radio at that point, you know. So that's kind of where I've been since when my second marriage ended. I saved up for 2 years. I saved up a bunch of money. A year's worth of living expenses, and I bought a bunch of equipment, and that's when I was doing the Nashville thing. And it wasn't until I quit my job that Jonathan said, come write with me, you know, because I'm sure he's got all his old pals who played music in Jackson going, hey man, you know, remember me, you know. And he didn't think I was serious about it, you know. And like I said, I ended up not doing that, but I was serious enough about it that I'd quit my job, and so I could just do music full-time for a year. So we went up there and we wrote a really good song, I think, you know, and a guy ended up cutting it, but he was an up-and-coming guy, and a lot of times that's the kiss of death for a song. If it's not a known person, they don't recut songs. It's almost like it's, you know, it's tainted at that point. So the guy did a really good version. He's really good. I hope he ends up doing something. But, he self-released it. And like I said, about that time, I decided, and I'd gone broke, man. That year that I had the living expenses, I ended up stretching that out for 2, possibly 3 years. I didn't stretch the money out. I just stretched not getting a full-time job. And I was doing everything. I was Uber driving in Nashville. I was delivering cars across the country. I was temping for UPS. And then I ended up just pawning and selling everything. I sold my Gibson J40, one of my guitar that I saved up for in that 2-year money period. Ended up losing that and just, fell flat on my face. I was gigging, I was busking outside of Old Navy in Jackson with the guitar case open just for gas money, because I was looking for a job. I'm not afraid to work. It was just, once you get in that, you're like, oh, man, I'm this far in. Like, I do not want to just tuck my tail and go home. But I ended up getting a job, which is actually where I'm working now full time. But I ended up having to go back to the first job I ever had at a grocery store, when I was 16. So you want to talk about humble pie, man, but I was too stubborn to go, I give up. Because right when I got hired, I'd also signed some songs to a catalog in LA that pitches to put in movies and TVs and commercials. And so I thought, okay, man, it's about to happen,
What advice does, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it didn't right away anyway. Anyway, go ahead.
I was curious, did Jonathan have advice for you while you were experiencing all of this?
I should say that Jonathan, I should say that the best thing Jonathan did for me was agreeing to write with me, because that joker is so talented, and I got to write with a professional. He had like 4 or 5 number ones at that point, and I don't know how many he has now, but he was established. That in and of itself is enough. But what it was, man, is he said, dude, what you need to do is you need to get a program. You can either get Pro Tools or Logic if you've got a Mac, and you need to start recording your own music yourself. And man, that was probably the best advice I've ever been given, because I did it. And if you want to get your stuff into, unless you've got bukus of money, you can go into a studio. If you want to get, it's one thing in Nashville, for country music, you write a song, you might demo it, you might do a rough demo, but somebody else cuts it. If somebody takes on that song, your big names they're putting all their money behind it. They're going to cut it. If you want your stuff used in an episode of The Blacklist, you got to do that yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's more of it wasn't a philosophical piece of advice. It was more of a, every day, here's what you should do. And that changed my world, man, because that's how I ended up getting the deal in LA, and I thought that was a deal. I didn't realize that when I'd gotten hired back on at the grocery store, I thought I'll be here for 6 months and I'm out as soon as I get a couple of things, Well, now, they're like a publishing company, and they get a finder's fee, which is half your publishing, just like a publishing company does. And then they go out and try to pitch your stuff. So that was really only the first hurdle. It was that your stuff is good enough to be in their catalog. But, they're pitching all kinds of songs everywhere, and they got to find that right fit. Mm-hmm. So 6 months turned into 5 years at the grocery store, but I learned how to record, which eventually led into the podcast. So
yeah, so that's what I was about to ask. Your first one was Left of Nashville, right?
Yeah, which was documenting the whole quitting my job. Man, I walked away I was making decent money, and I liked it. I got to drive every day. But it was a job. It wasn't it might have been a career. I don't know, but it wasn't my passion. You know, I was pretty good at my job, but I was like, I think I'm a better songwriter than I am at doing this job. And then after the second divorce, again, I found myself alone. I'm like, well, why am I working 60 hours a week? Like I'm trying to support a family when it's just me. Like, what, you know, what am I going to do? I mean, honestly, to fill that void too, you know, going home to an empty house every day after driving a parts truck, you know, it's just like, that's how people end up in the bottle, man, you know? So I needed something to make me want to get up every day, you know, besides money, you know?
And I think I read somewhere that you felt like the struggle made you more creative. Was that true?
I don't know the context of where I said that, but I agree with that. You know, I would think, well, yeah, Left in Nashville kind of started out of that podcast, you know, because that was me documenting that whole deal, you know, and it was like, well, this would be cool, and it was a way to get my music out there too. And you know, and Jonathan's in it. He's in 2 or 3 episodes, and you know, his episodes are like the most downloaded, and everybody loves, because you know, because when you write in Nashville, you know, you usually record it so you can remember. So we had the whole thing, the whole song. So I put this whole song. It was edited with my narration in it, but it was you know, you got to hear Jonathan Singleton writing a song, which not many people get to do unless you're in the writing room with him. So it was yeah. So in that sense, yeah, I was dead broke basically, and but I did have my equipment, and so I just would come up with ideas like that, you know, that but then, you know, it got to the point where I got so broke that where, man, you're just trying to eat, and you know, I don't have time to document this crap and put it, you know, put it out, man. You know, I'm starving. I'm just, you know, but yeah, the struggle does, man. You know, it'll show you if you've got it, if you've got the passion for it, you know, because who would do in the right minds would do that, would keep putting themselves through that, you know, who would walk away from, you know, making a good living to try it and then failing and then going, yeah, but you know what? I think if I just gave it one more shot, you know, I'm either resilient or I'm just stupid, man.
So what year is the first podcast, Left in Nashville?
That was 2015. Okay. So that's 5 years ago. And I did 2 seasons of that. You know, and the first season's really bad. Not content wise, because that's the one that's got Jonathan in it and everything, but like you can hear all kinds of like my edits, you can hear where they stop, and it's, you know, but halfway through that first season I learned how to edit, and it's fun. It was fun because I mean I was doing songs, and a podcast, even if you have narration, background, I had music that came in, you know, is way easier than trying to record and mix a song still, but you had that, you could basically use that same template, you know, instead of drums coming in halfway through, you've got the narration fading out and you got some music coming in, you know. And I've watched enough TV and listened to enough radio shows, you know, produced radio shows that like This American Life and stuff like that, where I knew how to do that, you know, and use like road noise and bugs, you know, just outdoorsy stuff, you know, in the middle of, you know, depending on how it, and man, that probably is as much fun as creating a song out of nowhere and recording that for me. It's the same thing.
I was gonna say, it sounds like it was feeding that creative need in you, and almost kind of like, you know, what I'm imagining those like old radio shows where they would have the sound effects and different things.
Yeah. And you know, and you don't want to make it too campy either. I mean, you know, you wanted it to be, but you know, and that's when I kind of realized that it's all storytelling, whether it's a song, whether it's a podcast, it's storytelling. I mean, that's what you guys want from me today. I mean, that's just how we process information, you know? So yeah, it's just different ways of doing it, you know?
So you're as broke as you've ever been, you're producing, and I can't imagine doing this, trying to figure out what you're going to eat next because it's stressful enough
Right.
not
Yeah.
not being in that situation. So what comes next? Is this when you go into the next searching for ghosts?
Yeah. Luckily, I was there was a guy in Meaden, Tennessee, outside of Jackson, and he got it in his mother's house, the house he grew up in, and she had passed, 100 years old. He didn't know what to do with it. It sat on a piece of cherry land, though. It's like on 9 acres, right? And he just needed to keep it occupied for like tax reasons or whatever. So I ended up in that house. I didn't have to pay rent, but it was 100 years old, man, and it was to heat and cool it cost as much as rent. And then I had 9 acres. I had to try to figure out how to mow, right?
Thanks.
So, but still, that also allowed me to, and it was 40 minutes from my job. So that's why I was out at Old Navy trying to play for gas money, because I was spending what I would make just to get out there, and that thing was falling apart. At the end, it ended up being where I was basically squatting out there, and he was like, I got to do something with this house, because the foundation had shifted, termites, or it was built in 1906. I mean, seriously, there's not enough, because, the deal was you kind of keep it up, and I had gravel put down on the driveway, had a couple of trees taken down back when I had money, but you can't save it. This thing was, the foundation had shifted. It was shifted when I there was a room I used to practice music in, and it was in this office chair right here. It was hardwood floors. I could pick my feet up and I would slide to the other wall. That's how off the house was, right? So, I didn't need too much to survive, though, money-wise, especially in the winter, because I have to mow. And I got to where I was just living out of one room. I mean, it was awful, dude. It really was. I was living out of one room trying to heat that, and then just to keep my bills down. But yeah, I did the Left in Nashville thing for 2 seasons, and man, I just got tired of talking about me. It just seemed very self-serving, because at first, seriously, I thought, this will help people, especially if I hit my lick, man. Like, you can see it from the genesis, man. You can see it from the beginning, and if I don't, you can see that too. But man, it just seemed very selfish, And at that point, the podcast Serial had come out. And I've always been a true crime person anyway. I need to go back I took some of that creative writing that I learned, and I ended up writing for some local papers here in town in the mid-2000s. A lot of feature stories, nothing really hard news. I did a little bit of hard news, but it was pretty much, and like I said, I was a college dropout. I was in that newsroom. It was a little startup. They were trying to compete with the Jackson Sun, which is the Gannett paper in town. And but I did have some college graduates in there, who went to school for the thing. So I was only in there for 6 months because they ended up closing the paper down. But I ended up learning like about AP style and certain things like that. And their big thing was, get good quotes, always get good quotes. And then you kind of build the story around the quotes, and you don't put too many quotes in a newspaper story, but you do enough. Well, I kind of turned that on its head with the podcast, and I built the whole thing around the quotes, especially if I had some good audio. If you get enough, and that way, especially with the searching for ghosts. So I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't know. I know what I've read online about these stories. So, okay, so that give you a little background. After Left in Nashville, sick of talking about me, I was really hooked on Serial. I just thought that first season was the Beatles as far as podcasts go, true crime. I loved the way they edited. I loved the way she told the story. I loved her voice, Sarah Koenig. I just loved everything about it, which it was This American Life people. I mean, they know how to produce stuff, And I was like, man, that would be, somebody needs to do that on Casey McDaniel from Ireland, I was just saying that to myself. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. You've got all the equipment. You've already done a podcast. You know how to edit it. You know how to record it. You know how to write it. You can script it. You know how to do it all. You know, you just got to get people to talk to you. So I started the first season of Searching for Ghosts, which was a documentary into a look into the disappearance of Casey McDaniel, who disappeared from her home in 1996 from Milan, Tennessee, which is 30 minutes away from Jackson, 20, something like that. That started me on that thing, you know, the true crime thing. Because again, in my mind, it's all the same. If it interests me, whether it's a song, whether it's a documentary about me, whether it's trying to make a story about me registering for classes at Jackson State interesting, it's the same thing. It's storytelling. Everybody's got a story, and then you take something like a missing child. I mean, the story's already in there, man, right? You just got to pull it out, and you just have to guide it, you know.
Did it ever feel overwhelming?
Uh-huh. Yeah. I batted it around for months because I knew, man, I was about to open up a can of worms. You know, I'm a private person. I'm like a libertarian. You do you, I do me. I'm cool, man. You know, I was about to delve into people's personal lives, which is so not me, you know, and the subject matter too. You know, you're going, there's a lot of pressure, man, already, you know, to do this right. I didn't want it being tabloid, you know, I wanted it to be like Serial, you know, but you don't know how it's going to end. You know how her story, as far as we know, has ended. She's still missing. But what am I going to do with this thing? You know, and obviously the hope is that you smoke out new information, because there was Serial, and then there was Up and Vanished. There was a podcast down in Atlanta. It was the Tara Grinstead case. And that guy was not a podcaster either. He was a filmmaker, I think, like a documentarian, I think. So he was kind of like me. He was kind of in a field right beside that, you know. And dude, they cracked that case because of his podcast, and he was so off the mark. But what he did, he just raised so much awareness, and and his was a little more tabloidy than you know. You got to be careful, man. You know, you don't want to slander people, you know. But I saw that they made an arrest in that case first time in, I don't know, 12, 13 years. And his podcast was the impetus of that, for that. So I was like, man, that's best case scenario, you know. And plus I don't have to talk about me. And, you know, and I'm not going to lie, and people, this is one of the overwhelming things, is that what people don't understand, you know, I was not a mercenary by any means. But man, you can't take on something that much. People don't realize, you know, they hit play for 20 minutes. It's easy to listen to, but producing it, you know, it's a crap ton of work. I was trying to get sponsors for it, man, because I wanted to do well and do good. I wanted to parlay my talents into a career that also did, you know, good for people. Well, man, I got raked over the coals for that. You're trying to make the money off the back of this missing girl, you know. I mean, I got, that's enough to make you hear that enough times, man. That'll make you want to just, you know, what the hell am I doing? Screw you guys, man. If you don't want it, you know, you've had 20 years for somebody to do something on this. Nobody has, and now you're busting me because I'm trying to like eat, you know. And again, I wasn't a mercenary about it, you know. But people don't understand that these podcasts just don't fall out of the sky. You know.
No.
Am I right? I mean,
100%. And so, is this Resistance the first season or both?
First season. They shut up by the second season because, you know, you're always going to have your naysayers. But we, and man, I'm a little fuzzy on the exactly what went down while I was. We took season one, we took Casey's case as far as we could. And you have to understand, hardly anybody was willing to talk. I did this thing, wet finger in the air, and started in on this thing. And it was crickets, man. But I had two ladies who met with me for 6 hours and gave me everything, and then they got cold feet. I talked them into. I said, "Look, if you don't do this, I can't do it because I can't tell the story. Nobody wants to hear me read a story to them because it's all going to be, I need interviews. I need, and I was trying to explain. I mean, man, we had to explain what a podcast was around here too. Seriously, we had to put instructional things on social media to like, okay, if you're an iPhone user, no big deal. You have a podcast app on the phone, easy peasy. If you're an Android user, okay, here we go. Google
That's okay.
Play.
I've had to do that with my family for this one. So.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing was a slog, man. It was from start to finish. It was nobody wanted to talk at first, but I took it as far as I could take it, and it stayed open ended. We did throw some theories out there, and we did ruffle some feathers. We tried to keep it, as non-tabloid-ish as we could, but it's kind of hard to, it's really hard when you don't know, because man, 80% of what was being said about this case were rumors anyway. So you're just like, how do you verify this stuff? So that ended. I got death threats on more than one occasion with that one. But I think I was in a zone at that point. I was in a fog, and I was still running off the adrenaline of that. That within, I can't believe this, but I look back. It's like 4 months later, I started season 2. Okay. Which was Bethany Markowski, who went missing from my hometown, Jackson, Tennessee, allegedly from the mall. Reached out to Bethany's mother, who lives in Nashville, and she was like, "Oh, honey, you ain't gonna have any trouble getting information out of us." She was like, "Come to Nashville, and we'll get a team of people together who all have, we're all around during this time, family members and friends." I went up there, sat in a room, and recorded them for 6 hours, and it was already laid out by the time I had it. That season 2, if I don't do anything else, as far as a production standpoint, is what I'm most proud of. It comes off like cereal, but that's all them. That's all that, because I had the information. I wasn't having to fish for it, I'm trying to make this brief, man. I'm sorry. This is I get on a tangent.
That's great.
Basically, long story short, I was going to do Bethany's first because she was closer to home, but then I found out her mother lived in Nashville, so I did the Casey McDaniel story first because that was my island, still closer than Nashville. Well, it turns out we ended up catching law enforcement's attention with the season 2. They were listening to it like it was the talk around law enforcement circles. Well, it just so happened the main suspect in Casey McDaniels had gotten out of prison at that point and started doing hood rat stuff like he does, right? And he got on their radar, and so they were looking at Bethany's and interested in that. And then this starts happening. They jump on. Long story short, FBI ends up getting involved in Casey McDaniels, and they made the first arrest in 24 years with that case, and charged him with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of rape. I mean, it was in a nobody case. I mean, she still has not been found. So, I mean, that I don't know what they have or whatever, but the podcast is what started all the talk. Just like with Up and Vanished in Georgia, it brought attention to those 2 cases that, were multiple years old. And, but at that point I was so burnt out, I couldn't do it anymore. It all hit me after season 2.
So, that's a great accomplishment to generate that much attention, and B, Any chance that you'll eventually get to a season 3?
I'm keeping that door open. I don't want to, and because of COVID, no trials have been going on with Casey's case. No hearings have even happened. So, we're going to follow up. We're going to see all that through. So I will definitely have to do updates on anything that happens with season 1 and season 2, right? In those cases, I'm not going to drop it. As far as a brand new season, though, and a brand new case, it's such a, it is such a lot of work, and the odds of getting law enforcement, because right now we've just, in this area anyway, you've got 2 cases that are back in the attention of the powers that be, right? You throw a third one in there, they're not going to have the manpower to get on another one. So you're not going to get the same results, at least not immediately, which we didn't with Casey's immediately. We thought that one was never going to be solved. So then you kind of have to ask yourself, well, why am I doing it? Am I doing it just to tell the story? I mean, I can do that, because I wanted to do Marlena Childers, who disappeared from Union City in like 87. But you're talking 87, man. That's going even further back than Casey's, which was 96, and Bethany's was 2001, right? Man, you want to talk about, with Bethany, at least there was cell phones. Casey's, the internet had just started. But you go back to 87, man. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about work. And then if you don't have law enforcement to kind of catch anything that pops up, I mean, I'm not saying that they wouldn't drop everything and go, but I don't know. Again, you just kind of have to ask yourself, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Timing was everything on those first 2 seasons, and you couldn't predict that. And maybe I'm trying to predict it now, and I shouldn't say I'm not going to do that. But Marlena's case, which would have been the 3rd season. She was on Unsolved Mysteries, the original Unsolved Mysteries. It made national news. And, oh man, and there's enough stuff there that she was spotted in Memphis supposedly and all this stuff. Of course, the mother admitted to killing her, and then she recanted. It's a mess, man. But I also have my mental health to think about. I don't know that I'm cut out for it, to be honest with you, long term. I'm not a John Walsh, man. And I know he got into it. He didn't have a choice. His son, is what fuels him. But it's hard, man, to choose to do something like that over and over and over again. And not to be selfish, but I can't go crazy in the middle of it. It's not gonna do anybody any good, Well,
I can't imagine your circumstances, because I think any podcast launch might drive one crazy, much less the subject matter of yours.
Yeah.
Well, and plus, it strikes me, right, the diversity of your interest in this, right? Because you have the interest in the storytelling and the writing and this, all the work, like journalism, right? All that stuff that goes into being able to tell the story. But then you have like you said, your musical interest and writing the music and the sounds and all that. Then you have kind of the production of it. And I mean, a lot, right? And well, it's probably, I will say, in some ways easier for you because you have that diversity of interest and background. And also, I would suspect, makes it harder because you have so much that you're trying to do with these podcasts and these episodes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was a perfect storm. I didn't know what a podcast was when I was taking creative writing, or even when I was writing for those papers, but I used those tools eventually, and the music production and the mixing and all that, and it was just a perfect storm, which is almost like, you have to do it. You have to do this because look, you've got all these skill sets that you just kind of stumbled on, right? And here you can put it in one nice little package. So yeah, it was too enticing. Man, I had to do it. But then you get in there and you're like, oh man, this is a lot of work, because I'm having to do everything,
And then, like Kevin was saying, and you were saying before, what's at stake for the work that you're doing. There's a lot of kind of external pressure there too, besides the internal pressure I imagine you must have had with how you wanted things to be put together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do want to say this too. Just because, you know, like I said, it's open ended whether a season 3 will ever happen. I do not regret doing, you know, and I'm not taking credit for it. I mean, I think something bigger was behind this whole thing, that starting with the germ of the idea. Because like I said, I batted it around for 3 or 4 months. I was going to do it, then I wasn't. Then you know, it's like, and I had to. It moved the needle. It made a difference, you know. I don't regret that at all, you know. You know, and I certainly don't want to sound ungrateful and like, oh, boo-hoo me, when that was the result. It's just, but can you keep doing that?
Yeah.
You know, can you continue to put yourself through that? And that remains to be seen right now, you know.
It was also a success as far as listenership. Did you continue to pursue sponsorship, or did you just kind of let that go?
You know, I don't know if you guys may have looked into all this, and which I think, you know, you can kind of go you can go a different route, but like the industry standard for podcasts, you know, you have to do so many downloads per a 5-6 week period. I think I didn't get to where I was doing that until the tail end of season 2. And like I said, season 2 was I had so much information. I knew how that dude was going to end when I started it. It was just a matter of telling it the best way possible. I had so much audio and had so much help on that one. So I knew the thing was going to be whatever it was, 12 episodes maybe. You know, it was around 8 or 9 where I was juking the numbers, man. It was going, but I knew there was only going to be 3 or 4 more episodes. And that's one thing I did not want to do. That's why I ended Casey's season when I did, because that one's sloppy, man. Because like I said, we did not have the help. We didn't have the information. There was a lot of wet finger in the air, like I said. Mm-hmm. But what I did not want to do was drag that out and have really piss poor content just so I could possibly get advertisers. See, that to me, that is selling out, you know, where if you don't have anything else to say, you know, stop while you're ahead, whether that means no sponsorships, you know. And that's why it hurt so bad to get accused of being like a mercenary about it, because it was just like, you know, but yeah, the numbers for season 2, you know, and I think total right now, last time I looked, I mean, it still never broke 1 million, but it's like 353, 355, you know, over 250,000 downloads on that one, you know. So we got some attention, but like I said, it ended right when it was hitting the numbers that you would need to do that, you know. And again, I'm not going to keep it going just to make money. That's stupid, you know.
Sure. And then was it 7 stories or 12 stories? Is that the next one, or is that to be launched yet?
It hasn't been. That is what I want to do. 7 stories, Jackson, Tennessee, and you can see in the content, I've gone about as far away from true crime as I can. It's more, you know, 7 stories is just basically 7 unique stories from people from Jackson, Tennessee. So you had the Carl Perkins thing, but I didn't want to do the typical story. You had Isaac Tigert, who started the Hard Rock Cafe and the House of Blues. It's from here. Steve Fawcett, the first guy to circumnavigate the globe in a hot air balloon, from Jackson, Tennessee. A lot of people don't know that, you know. The Waffle House dudes. I don't know if the Waffle House, I don't know if I can make a good story out of that, but it is interesting. I love the ham and cheese omelet plate, you know. So, but of course, Casey Jones. But you had Sonny Boy Williamson, who was, man, Sonny Boy got a raw deal. And that's what I ended up making a trailer, because what I was going to do is pitch it to the city. And I did, because I wanted tourism to pick it up. And I wanted to make sure I could get funding for it, because this one was going to be a lot of work. But Sonny Boy Williamson was basically the Jimi Hendrix of the harp, or the harmonica. The way you hear the blues played today, he invented that style. Okay, a lot of people don't know that, because there was a Sonny Boy Williamson who came along after our Sonny Boy died, and he stole his name, and he ended up going on tour with a bunch of those British acts when the British blues thing was happening in the 60s, Yardbirds and all that. He played like Newport folk and all that. He stole Sonny Boy Williamson's name. I can't remember his name now. But yeah, our Sonny Boy got stabbed outside of a club in Chicago in like 48. And then the other Sonny Boy comes along and he gets all this recognition in the 60s, man. And so it's so bad now that it's like Sonny Boy 1 and Sonny Boy 2. But he basically just took his identity because he could pack the clubs out that way. And I said I was going to not forget his name. Who's the Randy Newman, you know, Toy Story, You Got a Friend in Me, and Short People, and award-winning songwriter.
Yeah.
His last album, man, he has a song in there. It was a single. He's got a video for it on YouTube. You got to link to it if you can, called Sonny Boy. And it's from Jackson, Tennessee, Sonny Boy Williamson, up in heaven, talking about how the other one stole his identity and how he's in hell because of, it's Randy Newman, so it's got a cool story to it. But Sonny Boy ended up getting on Randy Newman's radar, on his last album, and he's buried out here in Madison County, and everybody from Robert Plant to John Sebastian of the Lovin' Spoonful. There was a rumor that Clapton had come out here, but they lay harmonicas on his tombstone. He's just got a great story, man. And Mike Baker over here at the Jackson-Madison County Library is the one who had to fight to get him. He was in an unmarked grave. He fought RCA back in the 90s and said, look, you screwed these blues guys over the whole time they were recording and stole money from them. Least you can do is get him a good headstone. And so they did. And stories like that, dude, I just wanted to lay it out there. And then COVID happened. And so tourism was not a option this year. So that one's in limbo.
Well, I'm intrigued by the concept for sure. I want to hear all those stories.
Yeah, I do too. Because I'm gonna have to. You learn as you go, right? You got to research it as you go. So yeah.
I was gonna say, so of all these different backgrounds that you've had, it sounds like the storytelling one is the most interesting or kind of motivating for you. You started with kind of telling your own story, and then told two other kind of women's stories, or the stories of kind of two women, and now kind of profiling some different stories. So is that, do you think, kind of the thread for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, and because songwriting is the same thing, just in a different. And that usually is a little more introspective, the songwriting, and you're kind of going, this is a cool way for me to talk about other people. And like I said, if I get the quotes and get other people talking, and then I just kind of guide it, I can almost get out of the way and let the story tell itself. And that is awesome, man. Yeah, that's a kit for me.
That's what Kevin and I try and do as well. We just sit here and listen.
Yeah, because I mean, I always go, well, who the hell cares what I think about whatever? I mean, seriously, who am I to? Who cares? Especially in this climate, everybody's got an opinion on everything, and they've got a platform to put it out on. So it's like, I'm just trying to back out of it and just guide it enough to where it's cool and interesting and different and not negative and something positive. I know it's hard to say it's not negative when it's a missing persons, but it has some positive results.
Well, I want to go on record. I'm going to adopt your name and persona. I'm going to herefore to be known as Brandon Barnett. Copy
you're not going to get anything out of it. I mean,
I think it's, I'm joking, of course, but I think it's a good time to talk about your labor of love, your love story.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to share too with the image of all these kind of together.
Yes. Okay. So I mentioned Elliott Smith earlier in the interview, and that was the biggest influence for me and my buddy Ryan Stone. And we did some cool stuff, man. Elliott, for those who may not know, Elliott, I think I've already mentioned, he kind of rose to prominence because his songs were featured in Good Will Hunting in '97, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's screenplay. Oscar winning, blah, blah, blah. So, that was the buzz that year because you had Titanic was the other movie. That's who won that was Celine Dion, I think, won for the best song. But she also had Con Air. I think Trisha Yearwood was whatever that song was. But anyway, you had your big blockbusters, and then you had this little indie film, Good Will Hunting, and you had this little indie guy who had all the music in it, And dude, that was just that was like the Nirvana thing again for me, except more. It's like that's the kind of stuff I'd like to produce, and I'd like to have that's success to me, right? So Ryan and I were so, and we were playing acoustic guitar, and this guy was doing exactly what we were trying to do, you know, musically. So we just flipped. So after the Oscars happened, he went on tour. We just figured for sure he'd play either Memphis or Nashville. Man, everybody plays Tennessee, right? And we're right in the middle. We can go either way and catch him. Closest place we could find was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So we drove 600 miles to see him, got to meet him, got all these cool stories. Then we ended up going back when the next leg of the tour, he came back to Nashville. And we got to see him there. And then a buddy of mine got an autograph. Well, then I couldn't get anybody to go with me for the third show that happened at the now defunct 328 Performance Hall in Nashville. So I was alone. And it's the best concert I've ever been to because I don't want to give too much away, but the power went out. It was a bad storm. That was 99, 2000. We had tornadoes here in Jackson. We had them in downtown Nashville. It was a bad year for storm, a couple of years for storms. It knocked the power out the venue. They put candles out on the stage, which you have to understand this guy was known in the Good Will Hunting. A lot of those songs were very stripped down acoustic. And, and as he got signed to a major label, his albums got bigger and they became more rock shows. Well, you got to hear him in his element playing stripped down, except he didn't have a PA. He didn't have a vocal mic. It was like he's sitting in the living room, except there were 700 of us in this venue. And the power was off. It was in May. It was hot. Everybody was sweating. They lit candles on the stage, the only lighting we had. We ended up scooching up to the stage. Anyway, it was magic. And then they used the tour bus generator to at least get him a vocal mic. And then slowly, power started coming back on, and he ended up doing the full band set. So we got to see him doing the total strip down to all the way. And I went alone. I wanted to do a documentary on that show alone. The venue is no longer there. They tore it down like in 2003. I didn't know. None of my buddies could go with me. I've been sitting on this for 20 years. I've blogged about it. I've talked about it. I couldn't find anybody. Somebody found it on like LimeWire in the mid 2000s. Somebody had recorded it on a really crappy, like on what journalists use, like a little voice recorder thing. Because this was pre-smartphones. You didn't even have any video of it, right? Or anything. And then it ended up on YouTube. And then as people started commenting on it, and I was like, there's my people. Because I haven't been able to share this concert with anybody. My friends, but they don't care because they weren't there, man. So it's a mini 3-episode podcast about how Elliott Smith changed our life musically, culminating with the Power Outage show. And then I've got complete strangers who I've tracked down somewhere in LA now, and we're all telling. Of course, it's built like the Searching for Ghosts. My narration, then I've got I can't do the music because of licensing. I do some of my music just for background, but I can't do his. But I've got snippets of him, the banter. I got the power coming back on, and at least for his vocal mic, and the crowd going wild, and it's it's just I was having trouble remembering it. I didn't have anybody to really talk to about it, and so I just found a bunch of strangers who were there and made a podcast out of it. I mean, that's pretty much what it is.
And what's the release date for this?
I'm hoping, I don't know when this is going to air, and I don't know the date. It's either going to be next week or the week following. I'm working on the last episode now, so it'll either be the week of the 14th or the week of the 22nd. It's coming out in September. So either 1 or 2 weeks from now.
Gotcha.
Just because I might. There's some, even if I have it done, there's a few things business-wise I'd like to kind of shore up before I release it, possibly. Because it ended up being a love letter to independent venues. And in the COVID era, that's kind of how I spun it. Mm-hmm. Not intentionally. That's how it came out. Because we did a bunch of cool stuff that you couldn't do at like arena shows, and these guys are struggling, man.
Yeah, sure.
So,
and just for those listening, or for the listener, Elliott is a late musician artist who inspired a lot of other artists, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and and this is I didn't want everything around Elliott Smith is really sad. Everything you read about him, but I don't want to. This is a very happy. It's actually a funny podcast, and I want to. But you can't get away. He passed in 2003, under mysterious circumstances. So there will never be another Elliott Smith show for me. So that's also another reason to get this down, document it, because man, you'll hear it in the podcast. It's been 20 years. We had so much trouble remembering certain things, but we all got together enough to make the story. So that was cool.
Well, I hope everyone will check it out for sure.
Yeah, me too. Check it out.
You certainly have creative ideas, that's for sure. When you start talking about one, I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating. And then you talk about the next one, like, that's even more fascinating.
I can't stop. I can't stop. It's almost like a disease for me. I have to get it out. It's almost like I have to get it out and go on with it. Get away from it. You know what I mean? It's
there's certainly benefits to that, right? But do you find that that's also challenging?
It's draining, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, which it's cool. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, but it's, you're in the shower and you're like, man, I wish somebody, and that's another thing too. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Seth Godin, the entrepreneur guy, Purple Cow and all that, where he's like, pick yourself, don't wait to be picked. I'm a huge believer in that. And instead of getting on social media and griping about what's not out there, if I find something, I would do a documentary on the band Big Star out of Memphis if I could, but I can't. It's hard to do music people when you can't use their music. Because podcasts have a different set of licensing. You can't just do a blanket license and use it. You have to actually pay for the song and then renew it every year. And people who do use other people's music in there, they're not doing it right. They're not doing it legally, I don't think, because I've looked into it. Anyway, but it's a way to go. It keeps me positive, because if there's something I don't like, well, I wish somebody would do something on this. You could, if it's in my wheelhouse, right? I do it. If I want to see it out there, I just make it happen, and then I can breathe. I can go on about my life, stop being mad about it. There's anger in a lot of this too. It's like, why has anybody talked about Elliott Smith lately? And then I'll do an Elliott Smith podcast.
Love it. So what have you learned about yourself throughout all of these?
I'm neurotic. No. Okay, one, what you think success is, like, I'm still not able to do this full time. You know what I mean? To me, that was always the metric. That was, also I do voice work on the side too. That was another byproduct of all this stuff. And that might end up being how I fund some of this other. So I don't mind the podcast being a loss leader if I'm making money on the voiceover work, because it's all the same thing to me. It's all audio. It's all me. I'm creating it, so I'm cool with that. I forgot the question.
What have you learned about yourself?
Well, I think there's also a part that comes from seeking validation. People say that they're not. I can say it all day long. They're liars. I'm not as bad as I used to be. I've gotten to a point now where I really don't have to prove it to myself. If I would listen to what I produced, if I didn't produce it, then I've hit the mark, right? We're used to, it was kind of be like, look at me, look what I can do. So I guess I've grown in that. I've also learned, but I've also learned that, success doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like. But I've learned that I can't stop anyway. I'm just going to keep chugging. So I guess I have resilience, because it's fun.
What advice would you have for an aspiring podcaster or musician?
Man, I don't know. Just stay true to you. I think we all do it. We find an artist, or we find some, you'll find an Elliott Smith, and you're like, oh man, if I could just do that. And then you try. That's kind of like early on. Even sometimes you might imitate them or whatever. And then, but your DNA, you come out in that. So it's always going to have your stamp on it. And then you're going to be original. I think just one, don't ever think that you can't do something, because you might be here, getting the camera view. You might be here, and where you want to, or the people you admire here, but it's just work in between there and there. If you've got the talent to start, and the desire, I think the desire is even more important than the talent, because you'll get better, and you just have to keep doing it, and you have to keep failing at it, and just keep going. I can't listen to the first season of Search for Ghosts or Left in Nashville. Season 2 of Left in Nashville I really like. Season 2 of Search for Ghosts I like so far the Elliott Smith one. I like the trailer for 7 Stories. But those other 2, I can't really listen. Especially Left in Nashville. That's the first thing I ever did. The edits are just too rough in it.
Well, even something as small as I kind of have a repetitive introduction now. I say the same thing every time, and it even bothered me because we release these out of order sometimes. And I heard one from the beginning where I said something different, and even that was cringeworthy for me. Just not sounding like the normal episode anymore.
Yeah.
Once I found a pattern, so yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. Being your own worst critic will make you better, though. I think if you don't let it cripple you, if you don't let it disable you, and I think that's good if you can manage it. Man, it's a tightrope walk. I could not stand. I took a voice and diction class at Lambuth University. The only thing I ever took at Lambuth, and everybody else was in there. They were like theater majors or something. They were taking it because it was an easy credit. I was in there to learn. I hated the way I sounded, and now I talk into a microphone. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I never thought I'd do that.
Same here, and just enunciation. The improvement in my enunciation in the short amount of time has been noteworthy. It's I still have words that I rush that I didn't realize until the podcast, and I still I need to slow down about. Still, I tend to rush that, but I'm like you. I never thought that I'd be doing long-term conversations on a microphone.
Yeah, the country still comes out in me when I'm talking like now. But when I monologue and I do, and I'm not really putting on the weatherman voice. I'm not really being. I'm thinking about it though.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about everything I say. I'm not quite doing the partly cloudy with a chance of rain thing, but I am kind of thinking. Or you guys, I'm just trying to like put my life in an order that I can tell it. So I probably slur a few words.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the if an astute listener would recognize. And since we release them out of order, they might never know which ones they are. But if they listen closely, I'd slow it down too much at times because I'm trying to get it right.
Yeah.
And so there are some episodes where it's like almost like I'm pausing and I need to just speed it up. And then there are others where I speed it up too much. So I think I've got it down pat now. I can actually communicate.
Pacing is everything, man. Yeah. It really is. Timing is that's very important.
So what's the biggest takeaway from your story?
Just I don't know, man. Just do what turns you on, I guess. But and learn to find fun in the work. This is fun for me, but then I hate it at the same time. I hate mixing. I love editing, actually. For some reason, I love that. I love putting stuff together. But, no job or no pursuit is all roses, man. You know what I mean? All the time. There's things about, I wrote a press release for this, which that was kind of fun, actually. But I wrote a press release for this new Elliott Smith thing. It's the first press release I've ever written. And I was proud of it, but I had to get online and look how to do the inverted pyramid and all that stuff and how many words to keep it and all that, and that's not necessarily fun, but it's not all a bed of roses, but if you're willing to do it, man, as long as you get a kick out enough of it, if there's nothing but what you do where you just get a kick out of it, you'll put in some work, you know.
I have to ask to follow up on that. When you discovered that you were in the hundreds of thousands of listeners or downloads, what was that feeling like?
It was cool. I mean, it was validating, you know. I don't, like I said, you know, I don't need that as much as I used to. But, you know, we were on, you know, Crime Watch Daily came from Hollywood, and we did on that season 2. And, you know, we filmed an episode for Crime Watch Daily. And, you know, I used to want to be an actor too when I was like 19, you know, whatever. Still trying to find my way. You know, and now I'm at the age where, you know, that I don't have stars in my eyes anymore, but that was cool. You know, they came down and the producer binge listened to the podcast on the flight here and then the drive from Memphis here. And then she pulled me to the side and she was like, "Hey, Brandon, you know, I've listened to as much as I couldn't finish the season, but I listened to as much as I could on the way here." Because, man, a lot of times people produce stuff on you and they've never listened to anything. You know, a lot of these people who have authors on, they don't crack the book open. You know, it's all just like bullet points, you know. So she tried to listen to it and she was like, "You're really good at this." Now, this is a producer in Hollywood now. "You're really good at this." Of course, I was like, you know, Southern all shucks, you know, thank you, you know. And she was like, "No, I'm serious. Like, you don't understand how good you are." Dude, that had nothing to do with it being Hollywood other than that was big time. And somebody said, "Hey, I like what you do."
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'm still riding off that. I think I can ride another 2 or 3 years off that. And nobody really knows about it till now. I mean, it's not like I preach that, you know, "Hey, guess what? So-and-so from Crime Watch Daily said I'm good," you know, I mean, but I keep it, you know.
Well, I think you should. We're still, or at least I'm still riding high from one of our guests mentioning another guest comment or episode. That enough. So I can't imagine what you must have felt like with the Hollywood producer mentioning how much they liked it. So.
Yeah, I listened to Jeremy Tubbs for this, and of course I know Jeremy, and kind of made me nervous, man. I like going into things blind. Jeremy's zipped, man. That joker does everything, you know. Like, good grief, dude. When do you sleep?
Well, if you like the Smash, you mentioned earlier liking the Smashing Pumpkins. Katie Cole, one of our early episodes, one of the first 5, she's the touring keyboardist and bassist for the Smashing Pumpkins, so you should check hers out.
Yes.
And we also had Logan Mize, who you might have met Logan if you knew Jonathan, but or knowing Jonathan, but he tells this amazing story of getting rejected 5 or 6 times in Nashville, and he's still successful, but he just went back to his home state to be successful. He got tired of the Nashville scene.
Yeah, I do want to check that out because that's I almost moved to Nashville when I quit my job, and I realized I could stretch my money out more here because the cost of living. So, and I don't regret it because everything I do is online anyway. Really, yeah. Think about it. Who cares what your zip code is when you know? Oh, yeah. And left in Nashville doesn't quite have that ring. I mean, I had to move to like Dixon to still keep that true. You know, like.
I love that title for sure. Well, Brandon, I don't know about Lauren, but I was engrossed in your story. It's been a fascinating episode, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. I hope I didn't run too long. I just now saw what time it was.
No, it's that's what we want. It was great.
Okay. Yeah. You can always cut it down, right?
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.